So with no further ado, we would like to welcome Ron Wenner from the QTM's Career Center to lead our today's discussion and workshop on LinkedIn and social media. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you, Professor Hong, for the invitation. Always a pleasure to be in the group. So my name is Ron Wenner, and my role in the Career Center is an employment strategist. So I work with students on things like networking and job search. So hopefully today I'll be able to give you a little bit of information that will be helpful. And of course, I'm sure you know that you can reach out to us anytime. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to put the handout package in the chat box. I'm just going to wait until, just to make sure in case anybody else signs in, but there is a handout package that we'll be referring today. And the goal today is really to talk, we're going to start a little bit by talking about some social media strategies and then going into LinkedIn. So really thinking about why are we on LinkedIn, and then looking at some tips for you. So how to reach out to new contacts, but also how do you figure out what's good information will go in on your LinkedIn profile. So again, just so that you'll be able to do this and really look at your profile based on examples. This is going to be interactive, so I warn you, if there's anybody here who's here and will not be participating, I'd really encourage you to participate. We're going to do a range of things in this session, which include simple things like polls, having your opportunity to give comments in the chat box, but also about 40-45 minutes into it, we're going to be moving into breakout rooms. So of course, it's really important that all of you that are here are able to participate just for your sake, but also for the people that are going to be in your breakout room. So before we get into content, I think one of the most important things to remember is that while certainly today I'm going to do my best to provide information to this group, it's also fair to say that there's a group of individuals here today. So it's not one group with the same needs. And there are a lot of things that impact on the way we do things. So it could be time constraints, whether family, work, responsibilities, identity, disability, health. Sometimes your academics have an impact on your approach to your career, or money, or even access to resources like the internet. And with all of that, what we want you to do from the Career Center perspective is really understand that we're here for you. So if any of these things do come up for you, you're looking for individual support in any of these areas, or really anything related to your job search, we want you to feel free to reach out to us, because of course, we're here for you. All right, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to do a quick poll. I'm just going to put the poll in the chat box. So what I'm going to ask that you do is please click the link and submit the poll. And it should just take a couple of minutes, and this will help give me a sense of where everybody is. All right, so we're starting to get response, which is good. And once you're done the poll, you'll notice that I've also uploaded a document in the chat box, which is the handout that we'll be using today as well. Great, so we're about halfway there, just a few more people to submit this. All right, thank you. So what I'm going to do, given the way the internet has been a little bit unstable these days, is I'm going to read off the results. So in terms of social media sites, 10 of you are on Facebook, 11 on Instagram, 11 on WhatsApp, 8 on LinkedIn, 7 on Twitter, and 6 on Snapchat. And for those of you that are on LinkedIn, let's see. So a lot of you have been for less than 1 year. So 5 for less than 1 year, 1 is 1 to 3 years, and 4 of you have got significant experience, so 3 years or more. And there are a couple of you that still haven't had the chance to be on LinkedIn. So that's great. That's a good cross section. And hopefully what we'll be able to do today is learn from everybody who are on there. Okay, it looks like a question was repeated. So how frequently? Quite, that's natural. So many of you, or more, about half of you, check your LinkedIn rarely, and about half of you check it weekly or monthly. Okay, and I'll come back to the LinkedIn profile. And in terms of the 6 of you that aren't on LinkedIn, 4 of you haven't gotten around to it. 1 doesn't think it's very valuable, and 1 has privacy concerns. That's great. Thank you for completing that poll. What that does is gives me a sense really of where you're all at. And I'm hopeful that today really is able to answer your questions. And as I said, please do feel free to throw questions in the chat box as well. So I want to start a little bit about social media in general. So much of what we hear these days is you got to be on this site. You've got to do this. I'm sure some of you have heard LinkedIn is a must thing. You have to do that. But the reality is, like anything else, these are just tools. And you can choose to be on these tools. And really the first thing you want to think about is really for any social media site, why? So defining your goals, whether it's LinkedIn or any other site. And I would imagine, I notice a lot of you are on Facebook or on Instagram, your goals for being on those sites will be different than if you choose to be on LinkedIn or on Twitter. So really thinking about what's the point? Why are you putting yourself out there? Why are you exposing yourself to the billions of people that share this planet? Because that's what you're doing when you go on social media, right? So you want to think about what's your goal. So in the context of a career, what is it? Are you interested in a particular industry? Are you interested in just general networking? Why are you doing that? And then from there, it's really important before you actually launch into it, particularly around your professional social media, is to think about what do people in industry say? So as an example, in some of the places where you might be thinking of getting on, people will say, LinkedIn's probably the best place because it's a large site. Some of you might be, let's say you're interested in more marketing, or you might be interested in computer science or other areas. There are other sites that will cater to you in a more specific way. So an advantage of the large sites is, in theory, everybody's out there, but there's so many other people out there, so it's hard to set yourself apart. The advantage of a smaller niche site is really you have a better understanding, or there are fewer people and the information is more likely to be relevant to you. And when you do that, then you want to research the individual sites. So as an example, different sites have different privacy policies. Different sites, there are some sites, for example, where if you post something, they will claim that they own the content or have the right to distribute your content. Is that what you want? And of course, every site costs something. Nothing is free. LinkedIn is free financially if you go with the basic profile, but of course, there's privacy issues as well. Some people will choose to spend money on those sites. So it's really important to not just set up your profile, really think about the sites, what's involved, and then choose maybe 2 or 3 sites. So for those of you that are on multiple sites, you probably will see that when you can't really keep your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter, your LinkedIn, and everything else up to date effectively all the time. So when you're thinking about it, you want to really be a little bit more strategic. Decide which sites are right for you. And the other thing is, one of the instincts, and I can tell you I'm guilty of this myself. I hear about a site, I log on to it, and I think, okay, I'm going to post my content right away. Would you do that with your resume? Would you send your resume out before editing it? Right? So really, part of this is think about the content, think about the sites based on your research, what is they're looking for? Because as we know, content can be archived, right? So you might post something up and a week later delete it, but we know with the internet, things can be archived. So I'd really encourage you to think about it, develop your content, and then post it afterwards. So once you're sure it's ready, and then of course, keep everything up to date. So when you're thinking about social media, before you go out there and post, you really want to think about the why. And that's probably similar to any other decision that you make in your life. You do think about why you're doing something before you do it. So again, I'd really encourage you to take the time to think before you post. So now let's get into LinkedIn, because that's the subject for today. And why, if you do choose LinkedIn, why would you do it? And the biggest reason to choose something like LinkedIn is frankly the scope. There are currently over 660 million accounts on LinkedIn, 17 million of which are in Canada. And what I think is most applicable to this group, over 300,000 of those are University of Toronto alumni accounts. So it's just by sheer volume, you have access to so many people. I know one of the themes of this course is networking. Here's access to over 300,000 people who have something in common with you. And we also know that there's a number of studies that support that about 3/4 of employers do some form of recruiting through LinkedIn. We also know that as part of recruitment, a lot of employers, what they will do is before they actually make a hiring decision, they're going to look up your social media presence. So LinkedIn is one way that you can control an element of your social media presence. So that's great. So what do you do about that? And we're going to talk a little bit about a few pieces of LinkedIn. So hopefully this screen looks familiar to you in that when you search for someone, whether you're within LinkedIn or outside of LinkedIn, you can frequently see the information, so what's referred to as a LinkedIn business card, right? So you're going to see your picture if you've posted it. Sometimes people choose to have a fancy background, and then they're going to see what we refer to as the headline. Just a couple of quick tips with the business card. One of the things that makes many of us uncomfortable about LinkedIn is that a lot of decisions are made to look at your profile as to whether or not you have a picture. So you're 18 times more likely to have the rest of your profile read if you have a picture up there. We can debate whether we like it or don't like it. Those are just the statistics that LinkedIn publishes based on their own data. So that's something to keep in mind, that it's really important that if you choose to be on LinkedIn, to have a professional looking picture. The second thing, when you think about LinkedIn, is the headline. So the headline is, in this case, Economist Center for Gender, Diversion and Inclusion Statistics at Stats Canada. Excuse me, when you think about that, what you're trying to think about is what information do you want the person to know about you? So imagine Rosa was mentioning earlier about the idea of in-person networking. If you were at a networking event and let's say you and I are both there and I have the opportunity to introduce you to someone to which you want to speak. Well, if I walked up to that person and I'll just grab someone. Okay, so Kristen's the first name on my list. Kristen, if I went up to someone and said, "Hi, this is Kristen. Kristen is." You don't have to answer this. I'm not going to put you on the spot, Kristen. But how would you want that answered? Because that's what your LinkedIn headline is. Someone is scrolling through your information, and based on what they see in that headline, they want to get an understanding of you and why you're on LinkedIn. And unfortunately, it's very short. You have a maximum of 120 characters. So when you're thinking about it, what is it in that very short period of time you want to know? LinkedIn, I think, does you a disservice because it automatically gives you one. So what it will do is either say, student at University of Toronto, or pull up, in this case, the title, the person's job title. So sometimes your job title is enough, but for most of us, and particularly when we're a student or a new graduate and we're trying out there and we're trying to pursue a career, a job title really isn't what we want them to know. So what you're trying to think about is, what is it? Is there something you want to be known for? It could be graduating from whatever program you're focusing on. It could be an experience that you have, but also it's helpful to think about why you're on LinkedIn. So when I say why you're on LinkedIn, what I mean is, are you pursuing opportunities in a particular field? Are you hoping to meet professionals in a certain area? So we're going to see samples in a little bit. You're going to have the opportunity to look up some profiles. On page 6 in your handout package, we also have a worksheet for you. So you'll be able to work on that after today's workshop. But again, I just want you to think about how would you like to be introduced? And knowing that, that person, fair or not, when they look at this, they're making their first decision is, do I want to keep reading? That's all they're deciding. So that's why the information on this page. You don't control your name. You control your picture. You can control your background. But the biggest thing that you control is this area here, the headline section. So I'm going to go back. I want to go look at the results here and look at the About section. Okay, so 4 of you haven't completed an About section. 1 of you has something very brief, and 2 of you have somewhat detailed. Okay, perfect. That's really helpful to know. So what is this About section thing, and why is it important? So if you think about what happens, and let's go back. I like the analogy of an actual networking event. So now we're at a networking event, and I now have introduced Hadassah to the person that she's interested in speaking to. And then, so they know the name, they know a little bit about, let's say, what Hadassah's studying, what their interests are. And then they turn to Hadassah and say, that scary question. What's the scariest question you can think of at a networking event? Please feel free to put it in the chat box. Let's see if you know that scary question. Let's see. All right. Andy gets the prize for she got it. It's the first answer. Tell me about yourself. And that's a very scary question, right? So we want to put that into some perspective, because tell me about yourself could mean a lot of different things. Tell me about yourself. Let's say if you were at a party with friends, you'd be talking about certain aspects of your life. At an interview, you're going to be talking about tell me about yourself as it relates to this particular job. On LinkedIn, I'm going to be honest with you, it's hard. It's very hard because LinkedIn is not one where you can tailor your section based on every person that's reading it. Right? Every person, regardless of industry, will see the same About section. So what you want to think about in this is really thinking about, what are the things in general. So let's go back to, remember in the early parts of the session, I was talking about your goals for being on LinkedIn. Well, that's helpful for the reader to know. Are you looking for work? Are you interested in meeting professionals? But with a little bit more detail. So if someone basically is looking at this and thinking, well, why am I bothering reading this? They're not that mean consciously, of course. But subconsciously, that's what we're thinking. Why should I keep reading? So if you're able to talk about what it is or why you're on there, that's really helpful. So again, interested in a particular field, researching, whatever that might be. thinking more about things like, okay, what key information about your background would be helpful? So if, let's say, you're interested in a particular industry, are there things from courses, are there things from your personal experiences, whether it's paid or unpaid, that you think demonstrate some of the skills or qualities that your reader will want to see? And finally, and I think what's really important is, one of the hardest parts, whether we're in a pandemic or not, one of the hardest things about LinkedIn in general is that, it's an electronic form of communication, right? So what that means is it's very hard for us to come across as human beings. We're all human beings. Your reader will be part machine, we'll talk about that in a minute, and part human being. So one of the things that's really helpful for you is to know that there aren't set styles. You don't have to write LinkedIn in a particular way. So you can use paragraphs, you can use whatever, you can use your own writing style. But also, one of the things that's really helpful to include on your LinkedIn profile is something about you that you're comfortable sharing. It could be an interest, right? Examples for me, I sometimes will put things like, especially when we're in the in-person world, I'll talk about how much I love the UTM campus and taking pictures of deer or interacting with nature. Does my love of the deer on campus have anything to do with my qualifications for a job? Absolutely not. But it demonstrates a part of my personality. And demonstrating a little bit of your personality can be helpful, again, as long as you're comfortable with sharing that information. So you're really trying to make sure that the person knows your goals, the details about your academics, a little bit about your experience and skills, and being a genuine human being. And what you'll see is some samples shortly. But this is the key that I would say to you. Remember that you're a human being. There's some debate about how long this can be. Generally, the best ones I've seen are about 3 short paragraphs, but sometimes it's a little longer, a little shorter. You're thinking about, again, what are the things about you that you want to share? And finally, the boring stuff, other LinkedIn content. If you've written a good resume, you can write good LinkedIn content. The only difference is that you want to be able to make sure that it's a little bit more broad-based. So on your resume, you're going to be tailoring it. On LinkedIn, because everybody's seeing it, you want it a little bit more broad-based. But I will encourage you to have a volunteer section if you have volunteer experience. Again, some of what we hear from recruiters in terms of, especially when they're doing searches, is that they really do value your volunteer experience, and make sure that you complete the skills section. And on the note of the skills section, I want to talk to you about a very important piece of LinkedIn, and that's keywords. So LinkedIn is very sophisticated technology. It's the personal side, but it's also technology based. So a lot of people that are going to be looking at the profiles will be recruiters or people with recruiter access. So they spent a lot of money for this. And what that gives them access to is the ability to search in a very sophisticated way about your skills, your abilities, or keywords. So it's similar to, some of you may have heard of the technology called applicant tracking systems that some employers use on resumes. They have skills in their mind, and they want to make sure that whoever they're talking to has those skills. And it's a really simple way where they do searches, and it's based on matches. So what it means is, in a few minutes when we talk about researching other profiles, thinking about the industry. What are the skills? So you can look at the job descriptions in the field. You can look at other profiles. Think about your industry, and a term that's often used is jargon. And I do not know the French word for jargon, but basically it's terminology that's specific to a particular area, particular field. So, jargon at UTM would be things like, if we talk about Acorn, very specific to U of T, right? Nobody else knows what that is. But it's helpful to know the jargon for an industry because, again, if someone is doing a search for you, you want to see that. However, and this is the big caveat, people are going to be looking at your profile as humans as well. So what that means is there are people out there who like to try and trick the databases or the applicant tracking systems by just putting a list of keywords on their documents, thinking, okay, I'm going to put them all there, so I'm going to get more hits. In theory, sounds great. But then the human being looks at it and see that you've done that, and they see that you're not really being completely honest and transparent. So you're better served finding places to put those things in. So let's say if it's a skill, include it in a description of a position, or include it in a way where you're demonstrating it in your about section. So those are the key things about profiles. This is the boring, you survived the boring part of this workshop. This is, okay, now I know what I need in terms of LinkedIn. Here's the real stuff. I am going to show you a tool that will help you to do this well. All right, apologies, let me just fix my screen. And I'll just be 1 second, sorry about that. Here we go. All right. So when we're talking about profiles and ideas and suggestions, I could bore you to tears with my ideas, but that's not going to help you. What's really helpful is to be able to look at profiles and make your own decisions based on researching. So in a couple of minutes, you're going to have the opportunity to work with some partners on profiles. What I'm going to do now is to show you how to find profiles. So you'll start with, on the search bar, if you see at the top, you're just typing in University of Toronto. And when you get there, you're going to see the University of Toronto page. I'll wait till it loads. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. On the University of Toronto page, there's a button here that's called Alumni. When you click that, you can see that there are over 317,000 living alumni profiles. Now, let's be fair. You're probably not going to be looking at 317,000 profiles, but you can do things that make it easier. Some of it, like where they live, where they work, what they studied, right? And just to be, so you know, these are usually the top 15 in here. So you might not find your particular program, and also what they skilled at and what they're skilled and how they're connected. But you can also put information in here. So I'm just going to put in a random number, let's say 2015 to 2018. I'm making this up as I go. Okay. So now in here, this has taken us down to 107. And I'm going to pretend that, let's say, you're interested in media and communication. As you can see, this is quite random. And that you studied history. Okay. Why have I done that? Well, now we've gotten this down to a manageable number. It's 268. When you do this, what you see at the bottom of this page is people that match all of that criteria. So let's say you look at that and you see, oh, okay. Let's say Naomi, administrative and communication, great. I'm interested. I want to learn more about what she does. Okay? So then you click her profile. And what you'll see in her profile is how she's chosen to talk about herself. What's helpful here is when you look at other people's about sections. So you might, if you look at, let's say, 10 people's about section, you're probably going to get a sense of different patterns, different approaches, but also, most importantly, understand, okay, this works for me, I like this, or I don't like this. And then get a sense of what they do, their educational background. So as an example, if you're in a similar academic background, you can say, oh, okay, with Naomi Nicole's background, there are things that I might have in common. So this will help you in two ways. One, in terms of helping you to research and get a sense of ideas about how you can write your profile. But also, this can help you to start figuring out people that you might want to reach out to. Right? So it's a really, I find this a very valuable tool, because what you're hoping to achieve by being on LinkedIn is to, you want to have a good profile, but the more you learn about other people's profiles, the better off you're going to be. You're going to be able to see, essentially what you're going to see is, how are people out there and who am I want to get back to who can I reach out to, right? You want to reach out. This whole point of LinkedIn, right? Networking, having a good profile, and reaching out to others. So this is where this exercise, I hope, will help you. What you're going to do for the next little bit is we're going to put you in groups. Let me just take a look at how many participants we have. Okay. So what we'll do is, we'll set up 4 groups, so groups of 3 or 4. And in each group, one of you can decide to say, okay, I'm going to log into my LinkedIn, and we're going to do this. We're going to look at profiles. And the idea is you can choose whatever criteria you want, and you'll have about 10 minutes just to decide, yep, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. So when we're done, you're going to be able to go back and say, okay, this is where I'm coming from. So that's what we'll do. We'll put you in the groups in a moment, and we'll do 2 things at once. Some of you want a little bit more time, some of you will want a break. So we'll resume at 12:10. So we'll combine, you're going into the breakout rooms with your taking a break. Okay? Any questions before you go into your breakout room? Okay. If you have questions, please do feel free to reach out, use the raise hand feature, and we'll do our best as well. So Rosa, could you please put them in their breakout rooms?
Okay, so I created breakout rooms. So Ron, you and I, we are in a separate room so that we're not in a room. In room 2, we have Chris, Lizelle, Monica. Room 3, we have Dylan, Marla, Lunam. Room 4, Owen, Patty, Rebecca. Room 5, Andy, Hadasha, Jennifer. Okay. And I think Sam just arrived, so put Sam in one of those rooms.
Perfect. So again, we'll resume at 12:10. All right, so enjoy the exercise, and we'll see you back in a few minutes.
Okay.
De l'amour, 1 million de roses n'est pas très pas autant. Maintenant, seule fleur dans mes entourages me rend malade. Je ne veux pas travailler, je ne veux pas déjeuner, je veux seulement oublier, et puis je fuis. Je ne suis pas fille de sa vie qui veut m'atuer. C'est magnifique et très sympathique, mais je ne le connais jamais. Non, 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 je ne veux pas travailler, je ne veux Je veux seulement oublier, et puis je fuis. Je ne suis pas fille de ça, fille qui veut me tuer. C'est magnifique et très sympathique, mais je ne la connais jamais. Non, 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 je ne veux pas travailler, je ne veux pas déjeuner. Je veux seulement oublier, et puis je fuis. Et puis je fuis.
The first day of class, filled with possibilities and unknowns. That's why Check Study Pack empowers you with homework solutions and expert Q&A, so you know you got this from the very start. Crush your new.
Non, je n'oublierai jamais la baie de Rio, la couleur du ciel, le long du Corcovado, la Lua Madureira, la rue que tu habitais. Je n'oublierai pas, pourtant je n'y suis jamais allée. Non, je n'oublierai jamais ce jour de juillet où je t'ai connu, où nous avons dû nous séparer pour si peu de temps et nous avons marché sous la pluie. Je parlais d'amour et toi tu parlais de ton pays. Non, je n'oublierai pas la douceur de ton corps dans le taxi qui nous conduisait à l'aéroport. Tu t'es retourné pour me sourire avant de monter dans une caravelle qui n'est jamais arrivée. Non, je n'oublierai jamais ce jour où j'ai lu ton nom mal écrit parmi tant d'autres noms inconnus sur la première page d'un journal brésilien. J'essayais de lire et je n'y comprenais rien. Non, je n'oublierai jamais la baie de Rio, la couleur du ciel, le long du Corcovado, la Lua Madureira, la rue que tu habitais. Je n'oublierai pas, pourtant je n'y suis jamais allée. le ciel de Paris s'envole une chanson de l'aîné d'aujourd'hui dans le cœur d'un garçon. Sous le ciel de Paris marchent des amoureux. Leur bonheur se construit sur un air fait pour eux. Sous le pont de Bercy, un philosophe assis, de musiciens, quelques badauds, puis des gens par milliers. Sous le ciel de Paris jusqu'au soir vont chanter l'hymne d'un peuple épris de sa vieille cité. Près de Notre-Dame, parfois pour un drame, oui mais à Paname, tout peut s'arranger. Quelques rayons du ciel d'été, l'accordéon d'un marinier, l'espoir fleurit au ciel de Paris. Sous le ciel de Paris coule un fleuve joyeux. Il endort dans la nuit les clochards et les gueux. Sous le ciel de Paris.
Alors, donc, ça fait 10 minutes qu'on a pris la pause. Ce que j'aimerais qu'on fasse, so sorry Ron, I haven't launched the breakout rooms yet. I was arranging and sending out some information. Now, so we're going to put you in breakout rooms. Okay, and once again, we are in a group of 3 or in some case 4. I know Ron gave you homework to go search for about and profile and using the search technique that he showed. What I would like you to do, in addition to what Ron asked you to do, maybe find a full profile as a group of alumni from UTM, from Department of Language Studies, who is working in the field that interests you. So of all those profiles that you will be finding, you will be looking for to follow Ron's instruction and implement the skill that he just taught us. So of those profiles, I want you to include the one profile from UTM, from Department of Language Studies, someone who studied French or languages with us in previous years, who's now working in the fields that interest you. Okay, and Ron just asked, okay, to make sure that in each groups you find the spokesperson who will be coming back to us when we come back to the class. Will be presenting the search that you do. Okay, so we have 10 minutes to do that exercise. Maybe give a little more time.
Yeah, why don't we say come back at 12:15, and that will give you enough time to do everything.
Sounds good. My apologies. I was sending out some information through chat, and I didn't see the time. So 15 minutes, we're gonna work in group. 15 minutes, 15 minutes, on travaille en équipe. Allez-y, amusez-vous bien.
So hopefully that was a good start for you. What I'm going to ask now is, I was mentioning that I would love to hear from each group. So it doesn't matter if you remember what group you were. If someone wants to, maybe we'll use the raise hands feature, whoever wanted to go first, and just we can start with that, and then each group will have the chance to just do a little bit of a debrief, just to get a sense of if there's anything they learned, what they liked, anything they'd like to change. And if you like, you can even share what the profile was. So does anybody want to start?
I can start.
Sure.
Okay.
So it's Marla?
Yes, it's Marla.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
It's okay. So we looked at a woman who works as a marketing and sales leader. She studied at University of Toronto. So when we opened her profile, the headline was just marketing and sales leader. She did not specify what company she's working at, neither like where she studied. So the only thing you can see in the headline is marketing and sales leader. We didn't like that a lot. And then in her about section, it was only like self-motivated new graduate with a passion for excellence. And that was the only sentence she wrote. So we also thought like this is really boring and like it could mean anything. She didn't specify what she's interested in, what she's good at, what her skills are. Yeah, like there's nothing, no details in general. And then for her past experience, she didn't put much in details. Like it was just like marketing and sales leader in Blue Key Education, and then graduate from University of Toronto. The only thing we liked is she had like I think almost like an internship, and that was the only thing that she specified what she's done and the projects she did, and she put like key points on what are the projects she's done, and that was like a little bit interesting because you can see like what projects she's good at. And yeah, that's it in general. And the thing that we didn't like is the education section is at the end, and this is the only part that specifies where she studied and what her bachelor is. So like when you read like she's a marketing and sales leader, she doesn't specify that she graduated from University of Toronto or what her major or like bachelor was.
Great, thanks, Marilyn. And one of the challenges of LinkedIn is that it puts it, and it's, to be fair to all of you, it's frustrating because it's going to put the education first. That's one of the features that they have. That there was a time about 4 or 5 years ago that you could switch that, but they changed that, unfortunately. I do have a question for Marla and your group. So it's safe to say this wasn't the best profile. You didn't love it.
Not. Yeah.
But here's my question. Even with that, would you see the value of reaching out to her and learning anything from her? So about her experience, her knowledge, even if she didn't write a good profile, is there anything about her background that interested you?
No, not really. Because when I first opened her profile, I didn't see anything about the about me section. It was like literally empty. So that did not make me like attracted to this profile. I just wanted like to end reading and move on to another person.
Perfect. All right. So thank you. Thank you, Marla, and to your
No
group.
problem.
I think Samuel is next.
So we looked at one of Maria's business acquaintances who had graduated from UTM recently and had just started as a coordinator at what is I guess a startup concerned with something to do with mental health awareness. Her about profile was pretty good. A lot of soft skills that are kind of tough to quantify, but did a pretty good job of explaining what she's like as a worker. The most impressive part to me of her profile was the she kind of squeezed blood from a stone, like had a lot of work experience and a lot of experiences in her profile that sort of lent themselves to showing what kind of worker she was. Having been, I think she graduated in February, so at the beginning of this month. So there's not a lot of like real hard, not a lot of data to support some of the things she was claiming, but had a lot of other experiences, volunteer experiences, that you could tell she was a good worker and probably could back up the things she was claiming of herself.
Okay, so based on what you read, it sounds like there's some good things on the profile. In addition, when you read it, is anybody in your group interested in reaching out to her because of the career or the transition she's made, maybe to get some advice?
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah, she seemed to. I mean, she's followed a career trajectory similar to what I would assume many people are looking for. It looks like she got a job right out of school, so that's pretty good.
Okay, great. Thanks, Samuel. Anybody else from the group want to add something?
Sorry, yeah, I was in Sam's group too. I think I also liked her LinkedIn headline. So her LinkedIn headline was the program coordinator at jack.org, and then she added constantly synthesizing different perspectives into my approach to personal and professional life.
Mm-hmm.
So I liked how she worked at the career center too at UTM, so I get why she knows what to put on LinkedIn and stuff. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So how about, is there someone from another group that wants to speak? And just please feel free to unmute yourself and start.
Hi, yeah, one of the profiles we found was for a recent graduate and also from the language studies department, but she focused on health sciences. So her profile seems very detailed, and it includes a lot of information about her experiences. Her headline is very direct, and it states exactly her position and where she's working. The only thing that was a little concerning was her about section, because it just mentions that she's a master's student at the public health, and she's specializing in health promotion and women's health. But the rest of her profile is really detailed with like the experiences of all the companies that she's worked at, her U of D experience as a research assistant, as a TA, and then all of the internships that she's done. And she lists specifically the kind of roles she had and the projects she took on. She also includes her education and lists like the qualifications she got, as well as the additional certifications and her volunteer experience. It was very thorough, and it like includes a lot of information that you could reach out to her for.
Great, thanks, Minna. And by the way, these profiles were not planted. You don't have to work at the Career Center to have a good profile. Okay, anybody from Minna's group that wants to add something before we move on to the next group?
I think my group has gone where we found the one really poor profile and then we found this good one.
Okay. How about, is there any other group that hasn't had a chance to speak? There should be at least one more group.
Okay, so what we found interesting that for the headline, it's really brief and very clean. So the person who we look at is currently TA and a student as well. And he listed lots of experience, job experience in details, really show his capacity, I guess. And then the only thing that I think it's lacking is probably the about page. Yeah, but overall it's good, clean, and brief.
Okay. So is there anybody else from Nigel's group that wants to add something? Okay. So what I'm hoping is that based on doing this, this is a taste for you, right? And you're able to see, okay, maybe this wasn't someone that I want to reach out to. Maybe it is. Maybe there's good things or bad things. Well, one of the things about LinkedIn in particular is that, you know, I'd love to tell you that there are exact standards and exact ways of framing information. But if I did that, I'd be lying to you. The reality is that there's a lot of different opinions. What we know is the science of it, so the keyword searches. So when you're doing your research, being able to look, see how other people put information, getting out there and reading some job descriptions. So when you look at, for example, when you search for jobs on LinkedIn and look at things that you might be interested in, really pay close attention to the words and how things are phrased. It really does make a difference for you. Okay, so that's the idea. And of course, this isn't the end of your help with LinkedIn. Hopefully you all know that we offer individual appointments as well within the Career Center so that we can help you in all of this. What I want to transition to now for the rest of the workshop is a little bit of a refresher and a few tips on using LinkedIn for networking. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw another poll in the chat box. So I'm just going to ask that you complete that. And hopefully this is a refresher from things you already know. All right, I think that's everybody. So, first question is, the goal of networking is to ask for a job. 2 said true, 11 said false. And that's a bit of a trick question, right? The strategy of networking, if you think about the strategy versus the goal, how many of you, if I asked how many of you want to be reaching out and want to find a job as part of your networking? If I change that question, probably everybody would say yes, right? It's part of what you're doing. So the goal of networking isn't necessarily to find a job in one way, but on some level, it is part of your other ultimate goal. The strategy of networking, though, isn't to ask for a job immediately. So Samuel's at the top of my screen, so I'll ask him. You don't have to answer, Samuel, but we've never met before. And if I said to Samuel today, hey, we've never met before, based on not knowing me, can you lend me $50? Or will you give me a job?
7 points.
7 points. Okay. So the answer is, of course, no. Sometimes when we think about networking, it can feel like you need to go out there and get a job right away, but that's really not the approach, right? So the next one, you did very well. 13 out of 14 of you said that networking is about building relationships that are mutually beneficial. Absolutely. If you think about this, if you're talking about building relationships, then good things will come. And if you think about it, think about where all of you are at. So as a fourth year student, if you think back to first year, think about your largest first year course. I'm willing to bet that you met a lot of people in that course. Let's say throughout the academic year, you met 10. We'll use a small number. And in that time, probably a few of the people you met initially, you met and yeah, whatever, didn't really click. So you probably didn't spend a lot of time with. Maybe half of them you spent time with, you even sat with them and talked to them in school. And of all that group, maybe there's 1 or 2 of them that you stayed and still have a working or a friendly relationship with them, right? So when you think about that, that's relationship building. You meet people, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but the relationships that you have, if any of those people in first year were the ones that said all the time, hey, can you do lecture notes for me this week? And then next week, can you do lecture notes for me? They're not really building a good relationship with you. The relationships that last are the ones that go for a long time and that both sides benefit. So those are things that, of course, really need to think about. Is there preparation work prior to networking events? The answer is mostly true. So all 14 of you said yes, and the answer is mostly true. Before you go to an actual event, it's easy to prepare, right? It's a little bit harder because we know that networking happens in more than just formal places. So all of you know that. So if, for example, you meet somebody, it's not a networking event, can you prepare? And the answer to that is there's a I'm going to bore you with a career center-ism, and feel free to yawn as I say this. The career center-ism is called planned happenstance. And it's a funny term of saying being ready, or what do you do, the what ifs. So the preparation that you can do prior to networking is some of the things you've done today. So remember, we started with, why are you going on social media? What are your goals on LinkedIn? What do you want to say? So if you spend some time thinking about what you want to say in case this happens, then absolutely, that's the preparation that you can do. But of course, you're not going to have a speech prepared in all situations, because every situation is different. And the final question is, it's impossible to network during the pandemic. So 11 of you said false, and 3 of you said true. It's absolutely false. It's harder, and there's elements of it, of course, not gonna lie. Some of this is more difficult, but you can network, and some of the most interesting networking I've seen has definitely happened during the pandemic. Okay, so what I want to do now, I'm going to do one more poll. See how you all do. And that will lead to the next part. So here's our next poll. I'm just waiting for a couple more. All right, we'll start. We've got, we're probably waiting for, yeah, okay. So we've got most of you here. So we'll start with how many networking contacts that you have. So let's see. One person said 1 to 4, 3 said 5 to 10, 3 said 11 to 20, 4 said 21 to 50, and 3 said over 50. So this is also one of those things that would be a trick question. What's a networking contact? Right? Tough question. Is a networking contact somebody that's on your contact list on LinkedIn? A Facebook friend? So what I think about a networking contact is there are so many different definitions. I go with this, and it's going to sound like a strange definition. Personally, I call it the coffee or tea definition. Who in your life could you say, or we'll call it the Zoom one, that you can reach out to, let's say when there's not a pandemic, or you would say, hey, I just want to grab a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and get your advice. Or who can you reach out now and say, I need to get some advice from you. It'll take about a half an hour. Can you spare that time in a phone call or on Zoom? Who are the ones that you know are going to be there for you? Okay. So when I think of networking contacts, I focus on the quality of contacts versus the quantity, right? Because who's in your network? Well, lots of people can be, and you all did a good job of showing that there's a variety. So whether it's classmates, employers, faculty, family, friends, previous employers, anybody can be in your network as long as they meet the definition of, this is someone who cares enough about me to want to help me, right? That's it. That's the only definition that matters. Because again, I will tell you that I know people, and use LinkedIn as an example. I know people, one of my friends has, without exaggeration, over 15,000 LinkedIn contacts. And I'm not kidding. He's a LinkedIn contact harvester. He's been doing that right from the start. Would you say that he's got 15,000 contacts or networking contacts? Of course not, right? So you think about quality versus quantity in this area. Now, one of your goals in this, so remember the exercise that we were doing is thinking about people that you can reach out to. So the question, how long is the first discussion? So we had one person say an hour, one person say 45, 3 said 30, 4 said 15, and 5 said 10 or less. So the answer is roughly 15 minutes. It varies, of course, depending on the individual. But if you think about it, the person you're meeting, if you don't know them, what's a reasonable thing to ask for, right? So always start with the reasonable ask. And finally, how many times should you reach out to a new contact? You did pretty well. So 4 said once, 7 said twice, 2 said 3 times. And I like to rely on research on this one. And so there was a recent study done by a group over at the Mars Discovery District. And pretty much what they said is, if someone doesn't get back to you, it's okay to reach out to them a second time and maybe a third time. But after that, the reality is they're probably not going to be a good contact for you. So those are some fundamental things, because of course, part of what we were doing today is helping you to identify potential contacts. So whether it's the handout in terms of examining who you already know, or looking at those other people that you're going to be researching. And really to find new people, in addition to the alumni tool we talked about, one of the things that you can use is something called 10,000 Coffees. 10,000 Coffees is a resource. It started with the idea of having 10,000 people meet and have a coffee, believe it or not, for networking purposes. But it's really advanced since then. And so now there's a hub for University of Toronto students and alumni to get together, and it's free. So if you're interested, you can sign up for that through the Career Learning Network. And again, that will help you to get access to more people. So you've got LinkedIn, you've got 10,000 Coffees, alumni associations as well. So all of you hopefully know that you have access to quite a lot of resources, including many, many alumni associations. So there's UTM, there's U of T, and every department has one as well. With the UTM Alumni Association, they also have a mentoring program. So that can help you as well if what you're trying to do is connect with other people. We know, let's be fair, networking for all of us, and I include myself in this, networking is very much a scary word. So having these tools and resources and the events that we offer in the Career Center, et cetera, can help you with that next step of finding people that you can reach out to. And that's really what we want for all of you, is to be able to talk to as many people as possible. And LinkedIn is just one of the many tools. So when you're reaching out, we have some samples for you in the handout package, but I just want to focus in on what happens when you reach out to somebody. How can you be reasonable with what when you're reaching out, right? So if I reach out, okay, now Maria is the first person on my screen. If I reached out to Maria and said, hey, Maria, we've got nothing in common. Will you help me? Will you help me get a job? You've never heard of me. That's not going to work. If I were to say, you know, Maria, I noticed that we're both, I'm studying at UTM. You're studying, I don't even know what you're studying, Maria, so I'll make it up. You're studying linguistics at UTM. We have that in common. And I've noticed this aspect of your professional background. I'm wondering if I could speak to you briefly just to get a little bit of advice from you. You're more likely to say yes. And by briefly, even say 10 or 15 minutes via Zoom. People are more likely to say yes. Again, if you're wondering about how to or what to say, we have some samples for you in the handout package. But short, to the point, make sure that they know that you want to talk to them versus talk to a networking contact, right? Really critical. People want to talk to people that want to talk to them, and they're happy to do that. People are happy to help, but if it looks like you're just fishing, it's not going to work very well for you. And then what do you say, right? So you'll notice in your handout package, we do have what we refer to as our conversation flow. But let's just break it down. Someone has agreed to talk to you. So let's keep it simple. Every conversation has a beginning, a middle, and the end. If I started my conversation with you, I've never met you before, and I say to you, Patricia, okay, here are my 20 questions. Probably not going to go so well. If I'm meeting you and you've agreed to talk to me and I say thank you, and I take the moment to do those, to break the ice. So with just how are you doing? And sometimes it feels, I know it sounds like I'm going into a lot of detail here, but we get nervous when we go to, or when we're networking, and we forget the little things. But the little things, remember that the goal, you believe it or not, the goal of that first networking conversation is not necessarily to get a bunch of information. It's the first step towards developing a professional relationship. So focusing on building the relationship, and the way you do that is start with the basics, have prepared questions, of course, and we have examples for you in the handout package. And when I say prepared, it means prepared based on what you know about the contact. So of course, if you find out about someone on LinkedIn, read their profile and ask questions that aren't easily attainable. And so that's, if you say, what's a fill in the blank, what does a French translator do? Probably not so exciting. Or, and avoid boring questions. So a boring question might be, tell me about the day-to-day of your job. Might be interesting to you, but Andy, if I said to you, so tell me about what the day-to-day of being a student. Would that be an exciting question to answer? If I changed it and I said, Andy, what do you like about being a student? What are the biggest challenges? What do I need to know if I'm interested in becoming a student? You see how that changes the conversation? And it makes it more interesting. So really try and avoid the kind of the dull questions. I call it more the term I use is smile questions. So ask questions that are actually enjoyable to answer. Be ready for the tell me about yourself question. Of course, we talked a bit about that in terms of the, when you talk about your profile. Just remember, it's, in terms of today, what do I want to know about you? So why do you want to talk to me today? Do you have goals that, are there things about your background that maybe we haven't talked about? Whether it's, talking about courses or things that you really enjoy, you're happy to talk about, but also demonstrate why you're interested in speaking with this individual. So that's you want to be ready for that, because sometimes people aren't ready for the tell me about yourself question, but whether that someone asks you that question directly or indirectly, there are two people in the conversation, right? And so, when you're talking to them, make sure you're ready for that. Listen, of course. It's okay to take notes if they say it's okay. And finally, and I'll just reflect back on my life. In my family, I was taught the two most important words in the English language are thank you. So at the end and after any good networking conversation, it's really important to give somebody a real thank you versus a forced thank you. A forced thank you would be something like, let's see, Marla, thank you so much for talking to me today. I enjoyed it. What have you said? If I said, Marla, thank you so much for speaking with me today. One of the things that really interested me about our conversation is when you talked about the website xyz.com. And in fact, I've gone there and I've got some really good resources. So I really do appreciate that. So you see the difference? And sometimes people forget about the thank you. And really sending a thank you is a big part of maintaining that professional relationship, right? They've given you the most important gift that any human being can give you, and that's time, right? And then just some basics, things you probably know. How do you maintain professional relationships? In my life, I follow 2 rules, and they're very simple. The first one that gets you to start your networking, your interactions, you know, the old do unto others, the golden rule. Basically treat people the way you would like to be treated, or as I like to say, basic manners, right? And I'm willing to bet that none of you follow the golden rule entirely, because you wouldn't have any friends if you did. The platinum rule is basically treat people the way they would like to be treated. So you start with the golden rule. You start with getting to know people, treating them with respect. But then a big piece of any kind of relationship building is understanding the individual. So I'm willing to bet that the way Marla likes to be treated is different than, let's say, the way Munam likes to be treated. There's commonality in terms of basic respect and approach, but people have different styles. So when you get to know somebody, think a lot about what it is you know about them, how they like to interact. And that's a big part of when we're talking about active listening. Understand them. And remember that relationships are ongoing. That means that if you just reach out to someone when you need something and you don't talk to them for 3 or 4 months, and then you get back in touch with them because you want something, that's not really a good mutual relationship. So again, getting to know the individual, staying in touch. If you see something of interest or value for them, certainly feel free to follow up with them, give them information. And you know, if you're a LinkedIn contact with someone, then you're also going to see what they post. So you might find more information about them and what their interests are. So again, do your best to maintain your relationships versus just reaching out once or twice and asking for things. So those are the principles for today. Some of this I mentioned earlier. Our goal in the Career Center is to have things available to you when you want them and when you need them. So we have things like LinkedIn critiques. So today we talked about the principles of LinkedIn, which is all well and good, but sometimes you just want someone to take a look at your profile and give you advice. I'm assuming that you're not just going on LinkedIn because it's a fun site when you're talking about strategies. Of course it's not. So if you want some help with your overall strategies, your job search, things, anything related to your career, we just want to let you know, and I mean this, I said this at the beginning, and I want to end with this as well. The whole point of the Career Center is to support you in with your individual needs, right? These group sessions like today are meant to give you some ideas about some of the things, but we're going to help you on a one-to-one basis as well. It's really important because you're all individuals. So look forward to hearing from you. I'm going to put a quick survey in the in the chat box, and I'll also put my email address in there. So if anybody wants to reach out, if you have any questions anytime, I want you to feel free to reach out if you have any questions, because I'm here to help. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Rosa, if there's anything you want to add.
Surely. First, thank you so much for this interesting workshops and overview. And as you mentioned, some aspects that you brought in were, of course, common sense, but in real life, it's common sense seems to be not that common. That's what I'm noticing, especially since I do hire students for my research and for my summer programs, and certain things that I assume is a common sense, as a normal, I see that are that normal and that are that easy and common. So you're emphasizing on those aspects is wonderful, and also going into the specifics and details. And I learned a lot. I didn't know that alumni side was useful, and we could do that search. And I felt like I need to make sure that my profiles can reflect who I am, because for now I have nothing. It's a Sahara Desert, and you can hear the wind in my profile. So that's something, and I have a little bit of a question, but I'm going to ask my students to go ahead and ask the questions to Ron if they have any specific questions, because this has to be their learning, more than mine. So anyone, si vous avez des questions, allez-y. Okay, I'll start with mine then. That way. Oh, Samuel, allez-y, Samuel.
What do you find to be the most important element? I might have missed this, so I apologize if you've. What's the most important element of the entire LinkedIn profile, mine or anybody else's? What is the single most important and attention grabbing element?
So I'm going to answer that two parts, because you said first most important, and then you said attention grabbing, which isn't necessarily the same thing. I think the most important is clarity of purpose. So really thinking about what's your message. That, everybody in this workshop has the ability to communicate, but why are you on LinkedIn? And taking the time to have that. What I spend most of my time, and I'm just one person. Well, I'm going to say two. I think really, because these are the unique, the headline and the about section are the two most unique parts of this profile. And I decide whether I want to read based on the headline, but I'm one of those, I'll admit it, I'm a bit geeky. I like reading the about section because I like to get to know the people before I reach out to them.
Thank you, Sam. That's a wonderful question. And Ron for the frank answers. Anyone else? While waiting for others to ask and come up with their question, my question, especially, it relates to what you just answered, that about section. And what I really appreciated when Mala was presenting the group's view was how they changed the perspective. So instead of job seekers perspective, they kind of took the recruiter's perspective, and that's a wonderful exercise. And that's something that I really want them to do in this course. And we learn how to write pitch. Okay, the year after year, I give pitch exercise to all students, and what frustrates me is students kind of try to promote their abilities and competence, and I love them all, and I know them all, and I know they are good students, I know they are good leaders, I know they are good communicators, but what I see lacking is the ability to align those statements with the concrete evidence. So in this thesis, in their pitch or in their resume or in their cover letter, what frustrates me is a student saying, I'm a good communicator. Done. Okay, I know you're a good communicator, but give me why. Okay, what's the evidence? And usually students are good communicators because we taught them to be a good communicator. I know they're a good communicator, but for some reason they didn't. It seems like we don't teach them that bridging process, okay, how to align their statement with what they did in their courseworks, projects, and volunteering works, and personal lives that leads to, that supports that statement. So for instance, I did I took part in the French speaking contest that relates to communication and speech competencies, sort of thing. So what do you Okay, do you have any suggestions, practical suggestions for students
Sure.
to write that about section so that not only they write them, but they have this punch that
Yep.
okay,
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put mean Ron hat. I'm intentionally going to be mean, okay? This is mean Ron, and I'm going to put 2 basic questions in the chat box, and then I'll explain them. So when you're writing an about section or anything about your resume, the first question, if you're thinking about your reader, is why should I care? So you've done your research and you thought, okay, my reader cares about, in this, let's say it's communication, or what aspect of communication. Now I'm going to put on mean Ron hat. I promise you, if you meet with me, I won't be mean. Second question is, why should I believe you? So if you're going to talk about communication skill, there's 2 pieces. What type of communication? Communication is it's more of a communication family. So are you trying to show that you're a good presenter or that you're a good writer? And then if you had mean Ron beside you and I said, I don't believe you, I don't think you're a good communicator. After you stared at me because I deserve to be stared at, hopefully you wouldn't get violent with me, how would you respond? How would you counter that argument, right? And most of the time, you know, if you do that exercise, you're going to be able to come up with examples. But if you can't, come see us because we'll help you.
Relating to that, any questions or comments?
What's your best interview question? You know how like Google has those, you know, why are
Can you define what you mean by best? What do you mean by best? Because there's a lot of different
superlative. Maybe what if I were to, I guess, what's the most interesting question you have come across in terms of sort of out of the box thinking as an interviewer?
Sure, there's so many. I think because sometimes someone will ask an unexpected question, and there's 2 kinds. There might be a situation or a behavioral. Mm-hmm. So behavior would be, give me an example of where you whatever, mm-hmm. and the situation might be, what would you do if? Mm-hmm. And there's so many different ones. I think the answer to the question, I'll give you one I made up sometime, and I recognize if anybody has to go at one or has to go. But so the one that I made up is, what would you do if someone threw a pie in your face? All right, I saw that puzzled look on at least one of your. Why would someone ask you a question like that? Why would I do that to you? Anybody want to respond to that? Yeah, Kristen, go ahead. You just want to unmute yourself?
I'm guessing it's to gauge reactions and behaviors, especially given that the workplace can be filled with conflict. So that's what I'm assuming, but I don't know.
Okay, yep. And Moonam talked about how you respond to a difficult question. Anything else? Anybody else with a thought? And I'll give you the answer, I promise. So the answer really is, what's an interview? Is an interview an interrogation to see who has all the information? Or is it to see what kind of employee that you are? So the first thing is, if someone gives you a weird question like that, the first thing you want to do is think about, well, have they given me enough information? Do I know why someone put a pie in the face? Was it in the workplace? Did it create a danger to other people? So if you pause and think about it, you can also ask for information. Think about that in a workplace. If you're on the job and someone presents you with a problem that you don't know the answer to, would you answer it, or would you gather more information before you answered? Someone asked you a tough question at work that you needed to think about. Would you answer it without thinking, or would you say, can I have a little bit of time to think about it? So the answer is, to Samuel's question, that the ones where, because we're nervous, our instinct is to just answer versus to take the time to think about it. Those are the tough questions. And if you're able to breathe and give yourself time to answer, that will make the difference.
Do you think there's any place in an interview for getting to know the person on a non-professional level? Meaning, would I get along with this person, seeing as I'm going to be spending 8 to 10 hours every day for the next?
Sure. There is. I think, I mean, this is like, so the questions at the end, it's more a question of how. And so one of the things you can do at the end when they, when they say, do you have any questions for me, is you can ask questions and very specific questions about the climate. So, what if you ask questions about the successes of their team? What kind of employee do you find? So getting a sense of their personal style. Some places, so back in the olden days when we had, when this was in person, was people would be given a tour of the workplace to see that, right? So that's another way. But really just asking specific questions about successes of the team, what they see as the strengths, that really works quite a bit. And you do the best you can. I can tell you that I know all the techniques in theory, and I've even after that, putting myself in workplaces, which in retrospect, I wish I knew more beforehand. Okay. So we do have workshops, and also if you want to do some practice interviews with us as well.
So we have Munam's question in the chat box. Okay.
Okay.
So while Ron is reading, I do have a segment and sequence pedagogic specific to interview to
Sure.
teach the interrogative and the affirmative, all those. But I think that's an interesting question. So do you mind answering Munam's question?
I think, the most common that people struggle with often is the tell me about yourself question, because sometimes it feels like there's just so much to say. So it's really, I mean, to me anyway, because that could feel very intimidating. And if in most parts of the interview, if you're able to respond, think about what's tell me about yourself as it relates to our today's interview, that can help you quite a bit.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And that's both intimidating and scary questions, okay, for candidate, but also the recruiters sitting in the hiring committee, okay, because you never know what to expect. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah. So I can stick around for one more question.
Mm-hmm.
So I think looks like Kristen has her hand up.
Yep.
Yeah, so my question is, so previously we were discussing adding concrete evidence about your soft skills and hard skills on occasion, but how would you do all of that without making your about seem like a grocery list? Like, I know how to do XYZ because of my experience here, because I feel like even though you want a detailed list, you don't want to lose your reader part way. So how would you go about that?
Yeah, and what I'm going to do as we're talking is I'm just going to put something in. This is more the context of a resume, but it might help. All right, so what I've just put in the chat box is a resource called our position requirements analysis. And it's designed so that you think about the job or the individual and you're prioritizing. So, you look at a job or you look at a career, you might find that there are 10 things that are important. And then you analyze, well, what are the things that are most important based on what I know about this particular field? And to be honest with you, Kristen, you're making your best guess, right? I'm not going to say that you're ever going to get it right, because again, the challenge of LinkedIn is you don't have a singular reader. But if you're able to say, okay, if I could think of 4 or 5 things I want them to know about me, 4 or 5 skills or 3 skills, then you do your best to focus on that. And you make your best guess based on research, right? Think about essays that you write. When you write an essay, there's no way that you're going to cover everything that you think the prof wants. It's impossible. Then you'd be writing a thesis. So what you do is you research, and you make your best guess based on what you see.
Well, we used to have a
Thank
T-chart exercise for resume, so maybe I can bring the old document. Okay.
Yeah, well, this
Yeah.
actually, this is kind of
Yeah.
a replacement for it. I can
Okay.
pull up, I'll throw another one as well.
Okay.
And just see. But again, because you're taking the requirements first, deciding what's the priority, what's your example, and that's what that first one is, and then you're building outcome-based statements, which is the next thing I threw in there. But again, come see me, talk to me. I'll be extremely mean to you as well. I'm happy to do that. I'm kidding, of course. Anyway, I do have another student shortly, but I just want to say thank you again. I don't want you to feel like I'm leaving because I don't want to talk to you, because I absolutely would love to speak to all of you again. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you, Rosa, for the invitation. And please do feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.